Hello everyone, my name is Daniel, I'm just a casual racer, and today I want to talk to you about Logitech's Driving Force GT Wheelbase. Now this thing all the time pops up on the used market. Is it still a good option? It's a decade and a half from when it would have been considered kind of a commonplace, viable wheelbase option. It's got some unique features, this built-in sequential shifter, but it also lacks some things, like having anything that is decent for paddle shifters, instead just having these buttons here on the back, and they're quite mushy buttons at that. So we're going to jump in here. We're going to do a race in Storage Sim Studios Alfa Romeo P2 around Fat Alfie's Battenberg ring, and put this car through its, or this wheelbase through its paces. For historic stuff like this wheelbase might actually be a top option for someone who is looking to enter the hobby for the first time, or maybe you're downsizing for some reason. This is not a terrible option. You can find this for less than the price of a new regular controller. I got this for around $54, I think. That's what I ended up paying for it. Met up with someone in a movie parking lot and movie theater lot and purchased it from them, and they were going to move up into some higher end equipment, and I told them I was just looking to add this to kind of my collection of bases for testing purposes and stuff like that, which they thought was cool. And that's going to probably be your experience, whether you find this on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, through friends and family, someone might have one. It's a solid base, right? The internals are gear-based. It's rated at 2.4 Newton meters by Logitech. That's probably inaccurate in my opinion, and definitely if you're getting it used, it's going to probably have some wear and tear that will drop it even lower. But if you're looking at like Thrustmaster's T150 and TMX, or the Logitech's later bases, G29, G920, this base doesn't feel any weaker at all. It is right in there in the same strength category. So if you're looking at some of these cheaper bases that often appear in the used market, this is right there amongst them. And so it's one of those things where, if you're kind of more in that historic side of things, it's not a bad option because of the sequential shifter here. You can use in lieu of like an H pattern, or with obviously with any sequential shifting cars. And then, the issue is if you really only want to drive modern stuff, then you only got the buttons on the back, right? But here's the thing, right? You're buying this for your kid or something like that. Really, they're just going to have to deal with it, and it's going to be fine. There's nothing here that is bad. It is a solidly built machine. To be honest, this wheel was a great option back 15 years ago. It's just nowadays, right? The fact that Logitech is still using this gear-based drive system in their G923 is absurd, even if they do add little motors, to make more vibration effects for their True Force stuff. It's interesting because, right, why would I get a G923, or why would I get a Logitech G29 or 920 when I can get this wheelbase for $50 or so? Oh, there's a car off. Ugh. See, and you feel that through the force feedback. I mean, I was trying to control the car. It wasn't that loud. Here, let me hit a curb for you and try to keep my hands off it. I don't know if you saw that. And now we're wrecked here. I get back going. Notice the slight jolt there. Gotta go around this guy. I can go straight into him. But yeah, there is no issues with this wheel communicating details. We're on the cobblestones here. I don't know if you can see it, but there's definitely a very slight movement of the wheel. Like, the force feedback is what you would expect from any general entry-level gear-driven system. I still recommend generally the T150 and TMX. They're newer wheelbases. They also have they have that hybrid drive system being belt and gear, which I think provides a marginal increase in force feedback quality. But if you're still, like I mentioned, I recommend those bases over a G29 and G920. It just depends, right, if you can find those on the market. Now, they don't include a shifter, so I guess that if that's something, that'd be really cool to get and makes it seem like a better value proposition. I'll also tell you this, right? The pedals generally for both are pretty horrendous, or for this base is pretty horrible. The pedals for the TMX and T150 are pretty horrible. The one difference you will get with maybe like a G27, G29 is you're going to get much better pedals. And so that is one thing that Logitech does offer, is a decent pedal option, whereas this older Force version doesn't. But my recommendation is this. go and get Fanatec CSL pedals. They're pretty cheap, around 80 bucks. Got some shipping. You'll get them for under 100 bucks, right? And then at some point you can always add the clutch add-on if you want. You don't need to add the load cell. If you're looking to spend that much money, you might as well save up and get something a lot better in the future, better pedals. But pedals are what makes you fast, not the wheelbase itself. And so even if you want to race competitively, this wheelbase isn't going to limit you that much. I mean, if you really were concerned, right, you really start getting good, or that your child starts doing a lot of racing and really loves the whole sim racing hobby, yeah, then maybe you start looking at getting them a direct drive down the road, or they can save up for one. But in terms of, there are so many people in iRacing or other games that are extremely fast, you know, top racers who use a gear-driven system that have no issues. Because the issue is not so much the regular inputs, right? Those are going to stay generally the same. And the fact that it's a little bit of a limit from the fact that you're turning those gears and the internals isn't going to limit your performance. Where it might slightly have a limit on your performance is when you start to go from, you know, trying to save a slide. Let's see if I can induce one. You know, trying to save a slide and that snapping back and forth. With a direct drive, you can be slightly faster just because there's less internal parts and gearing that you're having to turn, right? You're directly into the motor, you're just turning the shaft itself. So for counter steering and saving a slide, sure. But if you're really driving fast, especially in modern cars, you shouldn't be sliding all over the place anyways. So it's one of those things where, yeah, there's like a kind of that edge scenarios where, yeah, direct drive will make you faster, but generally, or maybe even a better way to put it, it will allow you to save, you know, save more, allow you to push because maybe you feel a little more comfortable saving it when your car gets loose. But generally, there's a lot of people who can be just as fast on a gear-driven system like this. So if you're concerned about, you know, oh, if I get this for myself, I'm going to be at a disadvantage to everyone else. No. If you actually get some solid pedals with it, with the CSL pedals, like, they're fine. They're going to be better than some people's. That's a good way to start, and then eventually you can look at upgrading those to something even better. I mean, the Fanatec V2 pedals get huge praise. If you wanted something right away that was going to be high quality, you could get that and something like this cheaply, and I think you'd be under $300, roughly, which is really kind of cool. And having something like this, right, I had a friend, I was just talking to them, and they were, you know, they had just got some young kids, and they have a pretty big, medium-sized sim rig, similar to something like this. And they just don't have room in their living room for it anymore. They need to spend more time with their kids. Their wife is getting on about, you know, you spend too much time sim racing, that type of thing. But then occasionally, right, there's a weekend or something like that where he is free to sim race. So he thought, I don't want to get out of sim racing. And I told him, don't sell your pedals. He had some nice, I think the VRS is what it's called, pedals. Some nice one of those. But he wanted to sell some of the stuff. So he sold his sim rig, he kept his pedals, and and I told him, and those pedals you can soften them up pretty well. So he softened them up, got a folding rig. There's a couple of options, I don't remember which one he got. And then he ended up looking around, and he actually ended up getting this wheelbase. And he's very happy with his choice. He drives mostly historic stuff, loves, like, obviously historic sim studio stuff. And he's enjoying himself with the wheelbase. He's got some nice pedals, and still very fast, faster than I am on anything I own. So, and it works well for him right now, you know. So it's one of those things where even maybe if you're downsizing, this is an option if you're really mostly into historic stuff like he is. So let's jump in and let me show you Automobilista 2 here. All right, so now we're in Automobilista 2 using the Driving Force GT. I had some issues getting the game to automatically steering lock, but after I updated the drivers and everything, I actually restarted my computer, and that seemed to work. So you can get it to work. It might just take a computer restart and stuff like that, where things can be a little finicky on an older wheelbase like that with a more modern game like Automobilista 2 is not uncommon. So when you get an older wheelbase compared to, for example, the T150 or the TMX, this you might have more of those issues than if, with the Driving Force GT. you know, using this car, right, even though it's just a sequential shifter, right, instead of maybe an H pattern, it still feels really good to just be able to actually manually reach out and shift through the gears here. So if you're like, for example, maybe really into Automobilista 2, and it's really kind of a great option, right, especially for younger, maybe your kids or whatever. In my opinion, it has slightly easier physics. I'm not going to say necessarily unrealistic, but they do tend to be on the, you know, letting a very aggressive amount of slip angle in the tires and things like that, which allows you to save some things more than perhaps other games. And with that, right, it's also got great graphics. It's got both historic and modern car content. So it's one of those things that's a pretty good game for someone looking to get into sim racing for the first time. And it does have a lot of historic content, as I mentioned, which is where I think the Driving Force GT really excels, because of the fact you have this kind of manual shifter and you don't have to use the paddles, which are pretty terrible because they're just buttons, you know, squishy, kind of soft buttons. So on the Südschleife here, driving a first generation of their Formula Classics, I think, or Formula Retro, whatever it is. 1970s Formula One car here. There we go. Down through the gears. Get this car slowed up. But, yeah, I mean, the details here, even in Automobilista 2, are fine. Like, you get what the car is doing, it communicates to you, you have some resistance in the corners when you build up speed. Like, it really is a solid experience, even using a wheelbase that is a decade and a half old, right? So it's one of those things for me, it's like, if you're looking for a wheelbase for your kid or yourself that's on the cheaper end, you know, less than a controller, the Driving Force GT can still provide that, even in 2024. And that's the race there. So the quality of the Logitech Driving Force GT, right, externally leaves a bit to desire. We've talked about the internals being the same as essentially what's in the G27, but externally, it's got a cheaper plastic finish than what comes in later versions. This one has like a plastic finish, which isn't great, but then when you get to the G29 and G920, it has that actual real leather wrap around it, which feels fantastic in the hands. If we look to, like, this is the TMX right here, you actually have a little bit more of a grippy rubber here. I think there's kind of a bit of a grippiness here, but nothing in comparison to this. This is an actual rubberized surface. This be maybe like a soft plastic type of material. You'll also notice here, and this is a good example of what I mean by not having shifters, you have the little buttons here on the TMX and T150. You have paddles, and the same thing even on the G27, the next generation, the Logitech started having the paddles. And so you just, if you're looking for paddle shifting, it's just really not there. And if you're talking about quality of the shifter itself, I mean, that is a very cheap, small movement. This is entirely plastic. I would prefer the Driving Force GT just slightly over the Logitech G27. That's just personal preference in just the button layout, the fact I do like the shifter, the internals are the same, and you're also generally going to find these a little cheaper. Now, why would I prefer the TMX or T150 over the Driving Force GT? And that is overall, as I mentioned, the finish here, you got better buttons. These are way more mushy. Even these buttons here, there's very little travel, but yet still somehow manages to feel mushy. There's a lack of consistency. Every button seems to have a different amount of pressure you have to exert. Whereas on the TMX, I mean, it's cheap, but the buttons are consistent. There is a nice little, when you push it, that goes in, and overall got solid paddle shifters, and just generally has a higher quality exterior build while also still having that hybrid interior. So when you're in the USB game controllers right here, you're going to want to hit on properties, and it will pull up this menu right here for you to see. And here you can go under settings, and this shows everything you're doing with the wheel or whatever. If you go under settings, you can see here, these are where I have it set up for both Assetto Corsa Automobilista 2, and I assume anything else that you would want to use this wheelbase with. So 900 degrees of rotation, want the max amount. Most games will auto lock down based on the particular car you're driving, so you always want to max that out. Obviously, you want to enable force feedback, wants to be 100%. Spring effect, put that at 0. Damper at 0. Enable centering spring, you want to uncheck that if it's checked, and you also want to turn down the centering spring strength to 0%. The game settings, you want to check this. This is very important. Right here, pull this up a little bit, just to make sure you guys can see. Right here, you're going to want to check this to allow game to adjust settings. Make sure that's checked. So this right here is the default settings you want within the Logitech Driving Force GT software. Alrighty, here we are in Automobilista 2 for the force feedback page for the Driving Force GT. And I'm just going to show you the settings you're going to want to do. You're going to want to use the default plus, and then this is as high as you're going to want to take these pretty much. 80 on gain, you can go lower. You can go lower on low force boost. I got it at 70 and FX at 70. But this combination here is going to give you a lot of detail, and you're going to get a lot of feedback, information from the wheel. Now, yes, it's like by boosting low force boost and adding this much FX, are you getting a realistic driving experience of the wheel? No. But you're not going to get that anyways with a gear-based, older wheelbase like this at all. So you might as well have a lot of information and stuff that makes it fun for the driving experience. So this is what I recommend here for the settings. You're not going to want any damping. Edit assignments, this is where you're just going to set up your wheelbase. And you don't want to change anything on a configuration. 50s, like the default for steering sensitivity. Like I mentioned, if you're having issues having this match the on-screen, make sure that the box in the Fanatec in the Gran Turismo software is checked, and then you can also restart your computer, and that was what fixed it for me. Make sure you calibrate your wheel under this as well. You're going to want it to match the end result on screen. Let me show you how to do this. So first you're going to turn your wheel one of these directions all the way. You're going to hit next. Then you're going to go in. See, it says 0 when you're in the middle. You're going to turn it to right. You're going to want it to line up with what you've set. So 900. Finish, save. Boom. Your wheel's now calibrated and it'll work. So that's how it works in Assetto Automobilista 2. Alrighty, so now we're in Assetto Corsa's force feedback settings. You got the gain at 60, filter 0, minimum force 15%. You're going to want under the effects, your curb and road are going to be at 75%, and then we'll give ourselves a little bit of a slip and ABS effect at 5% each. Soft locked, you want that checked. Skip force feedback steps, you want that 0. You can leave both the enhanced understeer effect and the hardware lock both unchecked. Over here for post-processing, center boost gain 0%, center boost range at 10%. You do not want to check enable force feedback post-processing. Lower speeds force feedback production, it's going to be at 3 kilometers an hour, and low speed force feedback strength at 1%. Alrighty, and so then you're not going to want to mess with the experimental options here. So this right here, combined with the settings that I showed within the Fanatec software, is going to give you a very solid experience. It's going to give you plenty of detail and allow you to reach the potential that this base can, right? It's not going to be direct drive quality. This is just allowing you to reach what can this base do without too much clipping and delivering you a lot of information, right? Where some of these stuff like the curb effects, road effects, the minimum force, right? That's not necessarily the most realistic thing, but we are trying to deliver a lot of information from this wheelbase. And right, if you're trying to simulate the actual forces that you would get through a steering wheel, you're going to need a different wheelbase. It's just not possible with this one. But what you can get is a lot of great information from when you're driving on a very cheap and affordable wheelbase. Alrighty, so that is the Logitech Driving Force GT. I've done my best to give you my review of the driving experience. I've done my best to give you a review of the quality of the base. And ultimately, as I said, a gut reaction of 1 to 10 would be a 4 out of 10 if you really wanted to go kind of add that value metric. And if we cut out in terms of the value, then it's a 3 out of 10 and just a pure rating. So definitely one, like I said, if we were looking at the TMX wheelbase, definitely favor that over this one. It's not a bad wheelbase, but it's just one of those things where if there's a better option that is better in pretty much every single way, you're just better off going with that. And the price, to me, at this point, when you're looking in the used market under $100, isn't going to be enough of a difference. Now, like I said, if this is the only thing you can find on the used market, you've been searching for a couple of weeks, or you've got to get something right now, this will serve you just fine. Or it can serve as a gift, and the person's probably going to enjoy it just fine. If they want something nicer, there's always then, and they use it a lot, then there's always an upgrade path. And there's affordable ways to do that as well, which I'm going to be doing future videos on, kind of showing a logical upgrade path that I think makes sense to people getting into the hobby. Things that maybe I think I did well when I myself was getting into the hobby, and also ways that I would do it differently based on my own experience. And also hearing from a lot of people who talk to me within this community. So, all right, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope that everything I covered here was informative, and I hope this helped you make a decision on whether to purchase the Logitech GT, or perhaps, you know, maybe this is just entertaining to hear someone talking about this bass. Maybe you owned one in the past. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Or maybe you still got one sitting up in a closet or attic somewhere. So comment down below. I'll engage with anyone who does, of course, as normal. And but most of all, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week.